The conflict that erupted on the 28th of February, 2026, will be remembered as one of the most explosive and consequential chapters in Middle Eastern history. What began as a high-stakes military operation by the United States and Israel against Iranian strategic targets quickly escalated into a titanic confrontation that drew in the Islamic Republic's Revolutionary Guard Corps and unleashed a storm of retaliation across the region. At the center of this seismic shift was the reported killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, an event that ignited fury from Tehran's highest ranks and unleashed an unprecedented series of attacks on U.S. military installations across the Middle East. As the sun rose over ancient deserts and modern cities alike, the world suddenly found itself on edge, staring down the specter of a much broader war. From the outset, the news of Iran's supreme leader being killed in a combined U.S.-Israel operation sent shockwaves through capitals and command centers, not just in Washington and Jerusalem, but in capitals from Riyadh to Amman, from Doha to Abu Dhabi. Iran's state media later confirmed that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had indeed been killed in the strikes, announcing days of mourning and warning that the nation's response would be decisive and without leniency. In the hours that followed, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a chilling statement declaring that it had launched what it called its most ferocious offensive against U.S. military installations across the Middle East, claiming strikes on up to 27 U.S. bases in what Tehran described as retribution for the death of Khamenei and the attacks on Iranian territory. This claim immediately lit up international news wires and social media, sparking both fear and disbelief as the world tried to grasp the scale being asserted by the IRGC leadership. Before we go further into how these dramatic events unfolded and examine the confirmed retaliation strikes alongside the broader regional escalation, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. These are the moments that rewrite global alliances and redraw the borders of war and peace. And you won't want to miss any updates as this crisis continues to unfold in real time. Iran's response did not come in whispers or measured diplomatic language from Tehran. Missiles and armed drones were launched in rapid succession, flying across borders and seas toward targets identified as American or allied bases, as well as military facilities tied to Israel's defense network. According to reports, Iranian forces struck at U.S. military sites located in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Jordan, and other Gulf states that host American troops, an assault that the IRGC described as punishment for foreign aggression, and an assertion that American and Israeli assets in the region had become legitimate targets. Among the most dramatic of these confirmed strikes was the attack on the United States Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Videos and witness accounts from the capital, Manama, showed anti-aircraft defenses lighting up the sky as explosions echoed and smoke rose near the Naval Command Center. The 5th Fleet, responsible for overseeing U.S. naval operations across the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and beyond, instantly became a symbol of how far the conflict had spread from Iranian soil to the heart of the U.S. regional military footprint. Not far behind, a series of missile and drone strikes were reported at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, one of America's most significant air hubs in the Middle East. This sprawling facility, hosting U.S. Air Force units and strategic aircraft, was thrust into danger as air defenses engaged incoming threats aimed at disrupting coalition operations and sending a message of retribution. In Kuwait, the Ali al-Salam Air Base faced its own barrage, with radar systems tracking Iranian missiles before they triggered defensive intercepts. Although reports indicated that many projectiles were intercepted, the mere act of targeting such strategic installations underscored Iran's willingness to strike deep into territory long considered secure. Across the Gulf, Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates was also reported under threat as air defense batteries lit up the skies to protect the installation hosting American and allied aircraft. These concerted operations, spanning several countries and involving multiple waves of weapons, marked an escalation that few in the world had anticipated just days earlier. While these bases stand out as the confirmed major targets of the Iranian retaliation, the broader picture painted by the attacks was one of near simultaneous multi-directional strikes. Reports circulated that missiles and drones had been fired toward locations in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Jordan, raising fears that the conflict could expand beyond an Iran-US standoff and pull additional regional powers into the vortex. Alongside military targets, civilian areas were not immune. Explosions were reported in cities across the region, and defense systems in several Gulf capitals were activated to intercept incoming threats. The emotional impact on local populations was immediate. Sirens blared, families sought shelter, and the normal rhythms of life were shattered as the reality of war bore down. For Iranians back home, the news of their supreme leader's death mingled with the surge of retaliation like a double wave of shock and resolve. State media portrayed Khamenei as a martyr and a symbol of steadfast resistance against Western and Israeli aggression, while the IRGC framed the military strikes as a sacred duty to defend the revolution and punish those who dared violate Iranian sovereignty. Yet, even in the midst of fierce rhetoric and massive explosions, not all claims could immediately be verified. The IRGC's assertion of attacks on 27 U.S. bases represented the group's portrayal of the scale of its offensive, but independent analysis and reporting have confirmed only several key bases as targeted. Still, the psychological impact of that claim alone was enough to send shockwaves through world capitals and strategic markets alike. In Washington, alarm bells rang as intelligence and military officials scrambled to assess the evolving circumstances. President Donald Trump and his national security team, already under intense pressure following their decision to strike Iran, found themselves confronting a broadening confrontation that threatened to engulf not just parts of the Middle East, but the global geopolitical order. Emergency briefings, satellite feeds, and rapid situation reports poured into the Situation Room as analysts tracked missile flights, base defenses, and diplomatic cables as if each minute could alter the course of history. Across the Atlantic and around the world, the response was mixed and tense. Some leaders backed the U.S. action against Iran's regime, citing long-standing concerns over Tehran's missile and nuclear ambitions, while others warned that the conflict had already spiraled into something far darker than anticipated. Condemnations and calls for restraint echoed from capitals in Europe and Asia, even as defense pacts and regional alliances were tested by the sheer scale of the confrontation. Saudi Arabia, once cautious about allowing its airspace to be used for attacks, publicly condemned Iran's strikes on Gulf territory, declaring its readiness to support fellow states and warning that continued aggression would carry grave consequences. Its crown prince reached out to allied governments to coordinate defenses and solidarity in the face of a crisis that had touched multiple capitals. Meanwhile, smaller nations, some hosting U.S. troops and others merely caught in the crossfire of regional turmoil, faced an agonizing calculus. Their citizens grappled with the realities of potential travel disruptions, flight cancellations, economic uncertainty, and the looming threat of further missile activity overhead. Airlines suspended flights over conflict zones, and global markets reacted with nervousness at the potential for destabilization in oil-producing regions. Back in Iran, the narrative was starkly framed as an existential struggle, one in which foreign powers had dared to violate the sanctity of the nation and pay the price through unified resistance. The Revolutionary Guard's statements emphasized that no target within range was off limits and that any continuation of external military pressure would invite continued counterattacks. These declarations resonated through fiber optics, radio waves, and television screens, stirring both nationalist fervor and international dread. For the families of American soldiers stationed at bases that had been confirmed as targeted, the tension was palpable. While official reports indicated that many incoming attacks were intercepted by layered defense systems, the risk of injury or worse remained a daily reality. Correspondence between troops and loved ones carried undertones of anxiety, exacerbated by the knowledge that the Big Bear conflict had now expanded beyond nation-state rhetoric into kinetic exchanges of missiles and defense systems. As the situation continued to unfold, Iran's government insisted that its retaliation was not random nor uncalculated. Instead, it portrayed the strikes as calibrated moves, meant to signal that any future aggression against Iranian soil or leadership would be met with responses that challenged the assumption of safe military bases anywhere in the region. It argued that decades of perceived oppression and external intervention had left Tehran with no option but to defend its sovereignty with all available force. The global fear of war grew as experts debated the long-term implications. Analysts warned that if diplomacy did not emerge swiftly, the region faced the risk of protracted conflict that could draw in additional actors from outside the Middle East, reshaping alliances and influencing global security dynamics far beyond the current day. Nations dependent on Middle Eastern energy exports expressed concern about supply disruptions, while defense contractors and markets closely watched for signs of sustained instability. Even within the tumult, efforts at mediation began to surface. Voices urging negotiation rather than escalation gained traction in international forums, with calls for ceasefires and diplomatic engagement rising among global institutions and concerned nations. But the reality of ongoing missile barrages, combat rhetoric, and psychological stress on populations made any swift path to peace appear distant. As night fell over Gulf deserts and cities rattled by warning sirens, the world held its breath. The attacks that followed Khamenei's death had unleashed a chain reaction unlike any seen in recent memory, a dance of missiles and defense systems that blurred the line between retaliation and escalation, between targeted military engagement and the specter of something far more vast. For now, the Middle East remains a tinderbox, a flame with uncertainty and human emotion, caught between the depths of ancient history and the cutting edge of contemporary conflict. Each side believes it is justified, each father and mother fears for their child, and each nation watches closely, hoping that wisdom might yet temper the fury that now commands the battlefield. In the end, the events that transpired after Khamenei's death are not just a series of strategic maneuvers and military strikes. They are a stark reminder of how fragile peace can become once the instruments of war are unleashed. The claimed attacks on 27 bases, real or still partially unverified, have forever altered perceptions of military engagement in the region. What happens next will be shaped by decisions made in command rooms, negotiations whispered in shadowed corridors, and the courage of people everywhere who face an uncertain tomorrow. And as this crisis continues to unfold in real time, stay tuned to this channel for the latest dramatic updates, hit that like button and subscribe, because the world's future is being written right now